So before we start the proper discussion of this week lesson, let's have a quick review of of our previous discussions. So during our first meeting, I gave you the different parts of a research paper or a thesis. So again, we have 5 chapters: the problem in its background, the review of related literature and studies, the research methodology, the presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data, and the summary of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So, yes, we're going to write the different chapters, but we will have a discussion first, okay, on how are we going to write them. Also, in our previous lesson, we gave the different definition of a research. So according to our discussions last time, when we say research, it is an orderly process of inquiry. When we say orderly process, it is a step-by-step process or a systematic analysis or process, meaning we have to follow a certain steps in writing a research paper or a thesis. Also, when we say research, we discussed or we gave a definition to research as careful, critical, disciplined inquiry, varying in technique and method. Meaning, when we say research, it varies in techniques and in methods according to the nature and condition of the problem. So it depends on the problem, on what technique and method we are going to use. Also, when we say research, it is a systematic, purposive, and a responsible process of gaining new knowledge. Okay, so those are just some of the definitions that we gave during our review in our previous discussions. Also, as a review, we gave the different scopes of research in education, in profession, and in administration. Okay, so aside from the definition and scope of research, as a review, we gave the different strengths of a qualitative research, since we will focus on qualitative research writing. So according to our previous discussion, when we say qualitative research, it is the means of the researcher to be closer to the world of your participants. Also, when we say qualitative research, it is focused on human experience and it uses authentic experiences. Again, when we say authentic experiences, a real experience, a genuine experience. Also, in qualitative research, it is the theme of everyday life that demands conceptual audacity. Okay, so that is just a review of our previous discussions. Now, for today, we will have a new discussion, the identifying the inquiry and stating the problem. Okay, so in this discussion, we will discuss the following. First, design a research project related to daily life. We will write a research title. We will describe the justifications or reasons for conducting the research. State research questions. Indicate scope and the limitation of research. Cite the benefits and also the beneficiaries of research. And we will present a written statement of the problem. So we will discuss them one by one. Let's start. Are you ready? Okay, so let's start. Okay, so let's discuss first the research project related to daily life. Or when we say research project related to daily life, meaning what is the relationship or what are the different relationships of research project to our daily life. So we usually ask, ano bang mapapala natin sa research na yan? Ma-apply ba natin sa discussion na yan? Ma-apply ba natin sa araw-araw yan? Oh, diba? So we will try to discuss what are the relationships between our research to our daily life. Okay, so first, everyday life is a methodology which examines and uncovers the realization of daily life and how they are communicated and interpreted by an observer or a participant. Okay, so when we say everyday life is a methodology, meaning every day has something to offer. Ibig sabihin, araw-araw, iba-iba yung nangyayari. Diba? So, what happened yesterday is different from what will happen today and what will happen tomorrow. Okay? So it is a methodology, meaning it examines the realization of daily life. When we say realization of daily life, every day, di ba, you have something to realize. Okay? So that is a research. Okay? So from every day, there's something happen. Okay? So that is a realization of daily life. O, minsan, magugulat na lang kayo. Gusto niyo na pala yung iba. Oh, joke lang. Oh, so that is a research. Oh, mm, 'di ba? Minsan ayaw niya na pala bigla sa inyo. Oh, so that is what? Realization of daily life. Okay? Okay lang yan, kaso lang iyakan. Discussion lang. Okay? So next is everyday life is participatory action research method embedded in people and situations, meaning it differs from people to people and from situation to situations. Okay? Next is everyday life research focuses on the details and seemingly insignificant occurrences that collectively contribute to how a situation, phenomenon, or incident is interpreted and experienced. Meaning, the our daily life has is different from situation, from phenomenon, or from a different incident based on how we interpret or experience it. Diba? So, what people experience is different from what we experience. Okay, so it focuses on the details, okay, of our everyday life. So that is like a research. So it focuses on the details. Next is exploring everyday life requires the researcher to focus on details, make connections and associations between emergent and repetitive themes. Focus equally on sameness and difference, meaning what happened today that did not happen yesterday, yes, and how that influenced the research topic, and make comparisons between researchers' experience and the topic being studied. Okay, so when we say research again, or it has something to do with our daily life that happens to our daily life, or the same based on the sameness and difference of what happened to our everyday life. So that is like a research. Also, everyday life is often written in a first or third hand person voice and relies on rich descriptions, sharp detail, and creative construction and comparative analysis. So, when we see first-person voice, di ba kapag nagkukwento tayo, yung kung ano yung nangyayari, so usually gumagamit tayo ng mga pronouns ng first person and third person, right? But note ko lang that when you are writing a research, use a third-person point of view or third-hand person voice. Meaning, we will use the word as instead of, ang gagamitin natin ay ako or ang gagamitin natin sa research is the researcher or the researchers. Okay, so we will use a third-hand person voice or a third-person point of view. That is just a note. Okay. Also, this approach is useful in analyzing qualitative data because it requires the researcher to consider and negotiate ubiquitous themes that occur in everyday life from work to play. Okay, so in research, di ba, we try to analyze the data or the information that we have gathered. Okay, so from our usual things that we do or from our studies, kung ano yung nangyayari from everyday life, that is like a research. And Everyday life as a research approach encourages diversity. When we say diversity, class, pagkakaiba-iba. So it is widely used among marginalized groups to privilege, meaning it differs or it is diverse. There is a diversity based on the personal perspective and our viewpoint. So my perspective might be different to your perspective, or definitely different to your perspective, right? So that is like a research. So how would you understand the perspective of other person if we are not going to conduct a research, right? Kaya nga tayo magre-research, di ba? Kasi, we want them to understand. Okay? So, those are just the things that our research project is related to our daily life. So, next is formulating the research title. So, in our previous topic, one of the things to consider in writing a research or a thesis is it must be connected to your interest. Again, when you are writing a research, it must be something connected to your interest or sometimes hobby. Why? Para, meron kayong interest or para alam nyo yung ginagawa nyong research. Okay? Now, for example, meron na kayong topic, ay gusto ko about mobile games. Yung iba naman, ay gusto ko about society. Now, the next step to do is to formulate a research title. Okay? So, a research title is composed of two parts. First is what we call independent variable. When we say independent variable, from the word itself, independent, what do we mean by independent again? Anybody in the chat box? So what do you mean by independent? Can stand alone from Princess. From Nicole, kaya mag-isa. Sana all. From Odilon, solo. Okay. What else? When we say independent, madaming ganyan sa kaklase natin. Can stand on their own, yes, or malaya. Diba? Total. Okay? So, yan, kayang mag-isa. Can stand on their own. So, you can do that something that can do things on themselves, yes. Who can handle themselves, okay, correct. So, when we say independent variable class, yes, from Ariana, it supports themselves. Okay, not depending on other from Liana. Yes. So, when we say independent variable, these are the factors or stimuli that directly affect or cause changes to the independent variable. So other term is when we see independent from itself, it is something that can stand alone or it don't depend on other factors. Okay? While the other part of a title is what we call dependent variable. So when we say dependent, kabaliktaran na independent. Yes. So when we say dependent variable, nakadepende lang siya. Yes, Sebastian. So kanina siya nakadepende? Kay independent variable. Okay? So these are the factors that are changed by the independent variable. So si independent, it can stand alone. Si dependent, it cannot stand alone and it depends on others. Yes, Frances Sophia, correct. So, in other term, para mas maintindihan nyo sila, when you are conducting a research or when you are writing a research title, independent variable, other term is what we call, these are the causes. While when we say dependent variable, these are the effects. So when we say cause, this is what? What do you mean by cause? Sanhi, tinagalog nyo lang eh. Okay, so when we say, yes, cause, sanhi, dahilan, di ba, kung bakit na yan. While the effect, Epekto. Galing niyo talaga mag-Tagalog class. Okay, the bunga. Okay, something that triggers the action from animal life. Yes. So they comes together in forming or formulating a research title. Okay, so in a research title, it is composed of two parts: the independent and dependent variable. Okay, so I'll give you an examples. Okay, so for example, our title is Selfie, the status quo of millennials in the Philippines. Okay, so when we say independent again, this is something or something that can be changed or can stand alone. So in this example, where do you think or what do you think is the independent variable? Anybody? The word selfie from leniency. Okay. So selfie. Now, what is the dependent variable? If millennials, okay, or the other part, the status quo of millennials in the Philippines. Now, how are we going to explain this? So, when we say independent variable class, di ba, something that can stand alone. And the dependent variable is something that depends on the independent variable. Now, when we say status quo of millennials in the Philippines, what do you mean by status quo? Anybody? If, you know, when we say status quo, what do we mean by that? You can answer in Tagalog, don't worry. Okay, from Sebastian, status ng isang tao, yes. Or the condition or state from the word itself. So, when we say, salamat Google, okay, the state, the existing state, or the current situation, okay? So, meaning, when we say independent variable or and dependent variable class, diba, in this example or in this title, the status quo of millennial in the Philippines, ano yung tinutukoy niyang status quo of millennials? The, the selfie, diba? Now, when we say status quo, yung status ng isang tao. So, maraming status ang or maraming state or status quo ang pwede nating gawing example aside sa selfie. Diba? Ibig sabihin si independent variable na selfie, pwede natin siyang baguhin. Okay? So, ano ba yung gustong iparating ng title na to? So, what do you mean by this title? Selfie daw is as the status quo of millennials in the Philippines. So, paano yun? Diba? Nagiging, ano yun, batayan ng physical appearance, for example, ng isang tao or ng isang millennial sa Philippines ay ang selfie. Diba? So, nag-picture ka lang, pinost mo sa Facebook, 100 pictures agad dahil sa selfie. Diba? So, that is independent variable. Ibig sabihin, pwede natin palitan si selfie. So, aside from selfie na naging status ng isang tao sa Philippines, ano pa yung pwede natin ipalit? Aside from selfie, relationship, yes, what else? Followers, diba? O for example, a number of followers in TikTok, the status quo of millennials in the Philippines. Diba? Pwede rin siyang gawin na yung status daw ng isang tao is nagbe-base sa followers sa TikTok or sa TikTok followers ng isang tao. Okay? So, si independent variable, pwede siyang baguhin. Pero si dependent, naka-depend lang siya kay independent variable. Diba? So, in this title, ano daw yung status quo ng mga millennials sa Philippines? Selfie. Okay, so, pwede natin siyang baguhin kung gusto nyo. Or pwede nyo siyang baguhin when you are writing a research title. Okay? So, another example para to understand better. So, in this title, the emotional responses and intervention of parents to toddlers' eating habits. So, ano yung independent variable? So, in this title, the independent variable is the toddlers' eating habits. Yes, correct, Mary, Ellie, and C. So, meaning, ang independent variable or ang focus niya is the eating habits of toddlers. While the dependent variable is the emotional responses and intervention. Meaning, in the toddlers eating habits, ang i-discuss natin about dun is yung emotional responses ng parents nila. Gets? Okay? So, another example. Effects of diet and regular soda on blood sugar level. So, where is when we say diet, class, ayan yung, di ba, yung diet soda, yung mga soft drinks na tinatawag na diet. Tapos meron naman yung regular soda, meron yung zero, right, na soft drinks. So, in this title, where is the independent variable? Yes, Sebastian and Nicole, correct, the diet or regular soda. While the dependent variable is the blood sugar levels. Okay, so ma'am, paano yun? Bakit ganyan? Okay, so again, when we say independent variable, since it can stand alone, meaning this is our focus, the diet or regular soda. So pwede natin siyang baguhin. Diba? So pwede natin i-discuss, for example, yung tinatawag na white rice and brown rice. Bakit magkaiba? Oh. So, the dependent variable is based on the sugar levels. Meaning, yung sugar level ng isang tao daw is depende sa amount ng sugar. Okay? Saan? Sa soda. Syempre, pag ang ininom mo is diet soda, low blood sugar levels. Pag ang ininom mo naman is regular soda or soft drinks, syempre yung sugar level mo is tataas. Right? Gets kung paano? Diba? That's why it is dependent variable. Kasi magbabago si dependent variable based on kay independent variable. Gets? Kung paano sila? Again, so dependent variable varies or depends on the independent variable. So in other terms, when we say independent variable, they are the variables that can stand alone and cannot change by other variable. So hindi siya nababago. Hindi siya nag-a-adjust para sa iba. Diba? While when we say dependent variable, okay, so they cannot stand alone and they depend on other factors. So they are the variable that is affected by the independent variable. Ibig sabihin, pag nagbago si independent variable, magbabago din si dependent. Okay? So, see the difference between independent and dependent variable? So, when you are writing a research paper or a research title, see to it that you have independent variable and dependent variable. Okay? So, again, in every research title, there should be an independent variable and dependent variable. Okay, so see the difference? So let's proceed. Do you have any questions about our independent and dependent variable? None? Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, so that is writing a research title. Again, so as early as now, if you think what research title you want to write, kung ano yung gusto nyo isulat, so see to it that you have the independent and dependent variable, huh? Okay, so let's continue. Now, next is, let's discuss the purpose of research. Now, when we say purpose of research, you have to ask yourself, bakit ko ba ginagawa to? para pumasa. The joke. Okay? So when we say purpose of research, so you have to ask, what is your purpose in conducting a research? Or in Tagalog, anong pinaglalaban nyo? Pinaglaban ka ba? Hindi, joke lang. Okay, so dun sa mga hindi pinaglaban, ay, ito na lang yung pag-usapan natin. Ha? Okay lang yan. Walang iyakan. Okay. Okay, so the first purpose is, so do you intend to convince the people about the practices which would lead them to make their own judgment based on the data presented in your study? Meaning, the first purpose is to convince. When we say convince, you are what? You are trying to persuade the readers. Okay? So, when we say convince, yes, pinipilit, or you are persuading. Again, when we say the first purpose is convincing, meaning you are persuading the readers. Okay? Next is, do you intend to discuss issues which would allow people to decide and act on the results of the research, meaning you are discussing issues and then you are letting your readers to decide and act on the results of the research. So, parang depende na sa kanila kung anong action ang gagawin nila after reading your research. Next, do you intend to analyze incidents by determining the causes and effects or the nature of the condition? So we just, with analyzation here. Also, do you intend to explain interventions done to treat the affected data in order to see the other outcomes? Okay, so when we say explain interventions, ano yung mga pwedeng gawin para magbago or para mapakita yung other outcomes ng topic ninyo? Okay, so again, we have 4 purposes. First is to persuade the readers, to discuss issues and let them act on their own. Also, to analyze incidents or to explain interventions or yung mga pwedeng gawin, okay, to treat the data. So those are the 4 purposes of research. So it's up to you, based on your problem, what is your purpose of research? Okay, bakit nyo kinakandak yung research? Okay? So also, when we say purpose of research, we have 2. The basic or pure research and the applied research. So from the word itself, basic research or pure research, meaning this is just a research only. So this can be a basis for future research, meaning magbibigay lang kayo ng information to acquire new knowledge. Because, di ba, last time I asked you, what is research? Sabi nyo, to gain knowledge. Okay, so you are just conducting pure research. Develop or refine theories not immediately applicable to solve problems. Or the research can be done in laboratories or via computer simulations only. So we just have to gain, you just want to gain knowledge in basic or pure research. Okay? While in applied research, it can be a derived knowledge. You will apply theories. You will present immediate solution. And it can be done in real-life settings like in schools, in hospitals, or in society. So when, again, to discuss it in a lighter term, when we say pure research, nag-research lang talaga kayo. When we say applied research, you applied what you have gathered, or you applied the data that you have gathered. Yun ang talaga yung difference nila. Oh, pinahirapan mo pa kami. Joke lang. Okay. So next is, now, since you already have the topic, diba, we discussed the topic already, it must be something about your interest. So a while ago, we discussed research title. So the independent and dependent variable. Now, after the title, the next step that you have to do in writing a research is formulating the research questions. Now, in this part of research, you will write the questions that leads, yung questions that gagawin nyo, it should lead to the answer of your topic or title. Okay, so we have two types of questions in research. First is the major problem or the major questions. So when we say major questions, it governs the entire study, meaning the general. It is usually in a statement form that introduces general problem of the research. So when we say major or general problem, ang ilalagay nyo dito is statement form. When we say statement form, this is in sentence form. Walang question form, ha? When we say question form, ayun yung may question mark. Kasi nga question form. Okay. Now, next is the specific questions. When we, from the word itself, specific, direct to the point. Okay, so it must contribute to the development of the whole research problem or topic. So when we say specific questions, the number of specific questions should be enough to cover the development of the entire study. So it must give precise answers that determine the difference or relationship or implications of the variables under study. Also avoid rhetorical questions, for they only elicit either of the two responses and may result to vagueness. Okay, so in writing a question class or in a research question, see to it that your question is direct to the point. Okay, so sometimes, if you can remember, di ba, nung gumawa kayo ng research back in your junior high school, di ba, ano ba yung mga nilalagay niyo sa questionnaire? Di ba? Agree, disagree, or sometimes, always, often. Okay? So that is being direct to the point. But see to it that your question has a connection to your topic. Okay, so to give you an example, so other term for research question class is, this is what we call the statement of the problem. Okay, so when we say statement of the problem, ano yung problema? Why do you have to conduct a research? Ma'am, problema ko makapasa. So yun yung problema mo. Okay, so problem about your topic, ha? So, this is an example. In this study, the researchers explored how parents of children aged 3 to 5 years old who have poor eating habits view their experiences with the child's health conditions. So this is the major or the general problem. Example to class ng statement of the problem, ha? So this is the major or the general problem. So paano yun? So ang general problem niya is what? How parents of children na 3 to 5 years old who have poor eating habits view their experiences. Meaning, ano yung experience ng mga parents ng mga bata na merong poor eating habits. Okay? So that is a general problem. Now, specifically, or the specific questions will attempt the following. What kinds of food do children aged 3 to 5 years old avoid to eat? Diba? So, ano yung mga hindi nila kinakain at bakit meron silang poor eating habits? They are connected, right? Next is, how do children aged 3 to 5 years old develop poor eating habits? Ano daw? So, again, that is connected to our major problem. See? Next. What is the experience of the parents? Kasi meron dito kanina. Of 3 to 5 years old children who have poor eating habits. Okay, so as you can see here, the specific questions are connected to the major question or problem. Gets? Again, so they must be connected to our They must be connected to our topic itself. So, kids, see the difference of how are we going to write specific and a major problem? Any questions? Okay, none? Okay, so it's good. Okay, so we already discussed the topic, the title, and also the research question. Okay, so we already done 3 parts of a research paper or chapter 1 of research paper. Now let's discuss what we call scope and the limitation of research. This is another part of chapter 1 class. Okay, so how are we going to write scope and the limitation of research? So when we say scope of the research, it identifies the possibilities to which the study becomes manageable in terms of issues, respondents, and time. To explain this better and shorter, when we say scope class, ano lang yung sakop ng research nyo? Or ano-ano lang yung mga i-discuss nyo? Okay? So that is the scope of research. So when we say scope, um, sino lang yung kasali sa research, ano lang yung mga topics na i-discuss nyo. So, dito nyo siya ilalagay sa scope of the study. Okay? Next is what we call delimitation. So, when we say delimitation class, these are the areas which the researcher does not intend to include in the study. So, when we say delimitation, the parts or the topics that you do not intend to include, meaning yung mga hindi nyo isasama sa research. Okay, so for example, your topic is about the computer addiction of senior high school students. So, when we say scope, sino lang yung mga kasali sa research? The senior high school students. Diba sinabi na natin kanina? Now, ano pa yung scope niya? Yung computer addiction. Kasi ayun yung topic natin. Now, the limitation. Sino yung mga hindi kasali? Dun sa topic natin kanina. Since ang sabi natin kanina, senior high school students, yes, from Nicole, hindi kasali yung mga junior high school students. Hindi rin kasama yung mga college students. At hindi kasali yung kapitbahay natin. Di ba? Okay, so that is the limitation. The researcher does not intend to include in the study. Okay? So next, aside from scope and delimitation, we also have limitation of the study. So when we say limitations of the study, this pertains to the restrictions identified by the researcher that may affect the outcome of the study. Again, restrictions identified by the researcher that may affect the outcome of the study, but over which he or she has a little or no control, but are anticipated. When we say limitations, sila yung mga restrictions na pwedeng maka-affect or maka-apekto sa research natin. But as a researcher, we don't have control, but or also makaka-apekto sa research natin. Okay? So when we say, para hindi lang kayo malito, when we say delimitation, yung mga hindi kasali. But when we say limitation, the restrictions, okay, that can affect our research. Okay? So, ano-ano yun, yung mga pwedeng maka-apekto sa research natin. Diba? So, for example, when we say, based dun sa topic natin kanina, wala tayong in-include. Sinong senior high school students yung isasali natin? Diba? So, pwedeng senior high school student lang sa campus nyo. So, ilalagay nyo na siya sa scope para hindi kayo maguluhan. Okay? But don't worry in writing a research paper. So, it depends on your thesis advisor kung ang ipapagawa niya sa inyo is scope and delimitation or scope and limitation. Okay? So, pipili lang sa dalawang yan. So, to give you an example of scope and delimitations, so these are the contents. So a brief summary or statement of the general purpose of your study, also the subject matter and topics that studied and discussed. Ano lang yung mga i-discuss sa topic, ay yung nakalagay sa scope. Also, the locale of the study, where the data were gathered or the entity to which the data belong. So when we say locale of the study, saan yung the place, the location of your study. So, for example, if si Ariana Par ang magkakandak ng research, since she is from ABE Cubao, technically and most likely, she's going to write a research in, or the location of her study is the students from ABE Cubao. Okay, so that is locale of the study, the location where the data gathered. Okay, so another example from if Sebastian Madriaga is going to write or conduct a research about the computer addictions of senior high school students, since he is from Ama Makati, well, basically, his participants are senior high school students of AMA Makati. Okay, so ang tawag dun is locale of the study. Again, that where the data were gathered or the data belong. So also the population from which the respondents or participants were selected. This must be large enough to make generalization significant. Okay, so sometimes we use 100 participants or respondents, di ba, para to make the generalization significant, para general yung answer. Okay, so again, class, when you are conducting a research, hindi lahat kukunin nyo, ha? O, ma'am, 1,000 po yung students namin sa school. O, hindi lahat sila. Okay? You will just get sample. Okay, when we say sample, a percentage of where you are conducting a research. Okay, so the period of the study, which includes the time, so, or during the data were gathered, kung kailan nyo sila kinandak. And the limitations of the study include the weakness of the study beyond control of the researcher, or the weakness spring out of the inaccuracies of the perceptions of the respondents. Okay, so yung limitation, susulat nyo naman dun yung weakness ng research nyo. Okay, so for example, yun nga, walang pasok sa school, so nahirapan kayo mag-conduct. Okay, okay, so this is an example of scope of the study. So as you can see here, ano yung mga diniscuss natin kanina, yung locale of the study, saan nakalagay, or sino yung mga respondents. So nakalagay dito, di ba? Determine the status of the teaching of science in the high schools of Province A. Where's the locale of the study? Province A. Okay? Kailan? Yung kanina, di ba, nakasulat doon yung duration. During the school year 1989 to 1990. Okay? So, naka-indicate sa scope yung sakop lang niya. Kung ano yung mga period and the locale. O kung sino yung mga kasali. Di ba? So, yan. For example, the teachers. And the limitation also is written in paragraph form. Okay? So that is an example of scope and delimitation of the study. So yes, so we already have the topic, the title, the problems, the scope and delimitation. Now we will discuss the research benefits and beneficiaries. So when we say research benefits and beneficiaries, who will benefit in your research? Sino yung makikinabang sa research nyo? Okay, so This is what we call significance of the study. When you see significance of the study class, bakit mahalaga yung study na kinakandak nyo? Okay, what is the importance of your study? So, you can write the rationale, the timeliness, or the relevance of the study. Diba? So, some of you gave last time na, ma'am, you have current events, current issues. So, that is significant. That is important. Why? That is included or written in your significance of the study. Also, the possible solutions to existing problems or to improve the problem. So, the beneficiaries, yung mga tao na magkakaroon ng benefit, and how are they going to benefit? Paano makikinabang yung mga tao na yun? Ayun yung isusulat nyo sa significance of the study. Also, the contribution to the fund of knowledge and the possible implications. When we say possible implications, these are the problem causes of the problems discovered and the possible effects of your problem. And also, how are you going to solve the problems? Okay, so this is an example of significance of the study. So this study is beneficial to the following. So sino-sino yung mga makikinabang sa study nyo? Iisa-isahin nyo sila sa significance of the study. Okay, so back in our example a while ago about the computer addiction of the senior high school students. So, sino-sino ba yung makikinabang doon? Of course, number one, the senior high school students. Yes. Who else? The parents of those students. Also, the future students, right? Yes, Nicole, correct. SHS students. Okay, so that is a significance of the study. Okay, so that's all for today. Do you have any questions about our discussion today?